wouldn't be able to goddamn take it. Boy, they wouldn't be able to take that. See, they wouldn't be able to take 35 bucks.
Video.
Yeah. You goddamn right. The police be ready for our ass. I know they're ready for my ass. I know they're ready for me.
Hey, Perlene, we're getting a little bit of background on your end.
Yeah, it's always, my son had a hard time with his video this morning.
Yeah. No problem.
All right.
Well, good evening, everybody. We'll just give this a couple more minutes like we've done the last couple of nights for everyone to dial in. It's the final night. You made it.
Yeah. Failed to start video. Please select another video cam. Okay. I can hear y'all. Keep working with my video part.
And that's okay if you don't have video. You have the mute though, right? So you can mute when we get started. Okay. That's the main thing. If you don't have video, we love to see you, but it's not the end of the world.
All right. Let's see. Everyone we can see everyone. Video setting. Video setting.
Yeah, I can tell you a type motherfucker get in where you get that and you slick ass shit. You gonna use something back. I'm sorry. Yeah,
What is going on? Let's see here. That bugs me.
Okay, we have just a handful more people getting on here. So about 2 minutes, we'll get started.
Melissa, can I try to share my screen here and see how
Yeah, go ahead and try it out.
Ah.
Can you see the robot? Okay.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome.
So when I did my show earlier today, it took me right at an hour. So I'm either going to talk really fast or I'm going to drop some stuff out. We'll see.
I promised everyone question time this session.
Okay. Well, usually the second time I do a presentation in a day, it usually does get shorter just because I'm kind of bored of it myself,
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you're like me, like I never read something verbatim. I have bullet points and I never give the exact same presentation twice because I'll mix it up a little bit purposefully, just to add.
Yeah, and I usually don't, I hate having slides because it forces me to go in a particular order. But this one I've done a few times now with slides and I have some funny, I think, cartoons in it. So
cool.
So that's why.
Good. We can use some entertainment tonight.
Right. Nothing better than tax humor.
Yes.
Yeah. Me. Yeah.
Keep me in.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our fourth and final training session for 2021. I'd ask everyone to mute if you can. Video's fine. We don't have quite as many people on video. So if you want to keep your video up, as long as we aren't having people freeze, that's absolutely fine. Tonight, we are going to cover a few things. So it's not going to be one long thing tonight. Courtney Kai-Decker, one of our site coordinators, will kick things off with security and cybersecurity. And then Steve Imming, who talked about the Iowa returns last night, will just have a couple of small things to follow up with on that. And then we'll go into some of the site logistics, just an overview, because I will be reaching out to you one-on-one next week to determine, you know, where you're going and when, and solidify all of those plans. And then we're going to try really hard to have a solid 30 minutes for question and answer at the end. Hopefully a little bit more, but at a minimum 30 minutes for question and answer. And if we don't have a lot of questions and answers, then we can always end a little bit sooner. But wanted to build that time in tonight. So you'll have a few things tonight, a little bit of variety. Courtney has a fun little presentation ready to kick us off. So once again, if you can mute and then put any questions in the chat box like we've been doing thus far, that'll help things go smoothly as they have been. So with that, I'll turn it over to Courtney.
All right, thank you very much. Now, as many of you may have heard already, I've done this show once already today and it takes an hour. I'm going to make it faster tonight. So I got to speak to some CPAs today just to get ready for tax season and remind them of the cybersecurity things that are super important when we're dealing with our taxpayers' information. There are two components of it. One component is cyber hygiene. The other component of it is keeping a secure environment. Now, for us, the secure environment is mostly kept for us to the extent that at our sites we're using equipment that's provided by the VITA program. So our hotspots and all of those sorts of things, the United Way security folks work on that to protect it for us. So the most important thing for us as the practitioner really is that cyber hygiene piece of it. So why does it matter so much to protect cybersecurity and have good cyber hygiene? You know, when you're preparing tax returns, you have valuable non-public information, your client's very, very sensitive information. You know, for lawyers, we have rules of conduct, accountants have similar rules of conduct, and tax practitioners, regardless of your credentials, and even if you are volunteering, you still have obligations to protect the confidentiality of the taxpayer's information. So under federal law, that's under 6103 and 7216, Graham Leach Bliley and their Security Summit and all of those other things. I love this little cartoon because, you know, it says we have all of the bells and whistles to protect ourselves. How do we let somebody in? Well, they rang the doorbell and we let them in. So what happens in the cyber world is we let them in by clicking on an email attachment. 90% of cyber breaches start with some sort of clicking on a nefarious email, and that email will download either some sort of tool that allows the fraudster to surreptitiously watch what you're doing, or it can put on ransomware or any of those sorts of things. So the good thing about the VITA side of what we're doing is when we're using VITA equipment, we're not going to have email, and so those risks aren't there. To the extent that you're ever logging on to TaxSlayer from a personal device, that's when things get more complicated, and it's super important to pay attention to having good cyber hygiene. So and to me, this is a little something that we all really should be thinking about as we're engaging on social media. You know, the fraudsters are looking for the weakest link, and the weakest link tend to be people who overshare their information in the social media world. All of those questionnaire type things that you see in the Facebook feed, the quizzes that say, what is your favorite, TV show from the 70s, or all of those sorts of things are social engineering type tools that trick you into providing information that you may end up using as some of your passwords. So the idea is to find out as much about you as they can through these tools. Now, some of them are just data gathering to market stuff to you, but there are these games out there that are nefarious. So ideally, you don't provide that sort of information to people. And to the extent that then, you've shared information like, that's why they don't want you to use your pet's name, your kids' names, and those sorts of things, because those are things that are very easy to social engineer. And folks have gotten smarter and smarter on the bad guy side to figure out the kinds of things we use for passwords now that we're getting better than using things that are just password 123. And I'll take a breath for a moment if anybody has any questions for me so far.
Nope, I don't see any questions.
Hearing none, I will proceed. Oh, wait a second. I pulled up the wrong presentation. Well, that's no fun.
So I'll just segue here for a second while you
talk for a moment, would you?
Presentation. Yeah. So Courtney mentioned equipment, and at each VITA site, we will have secure equipment for you. So we will have that internet figured out. We have laptops, and we do have a mouse to go with most laptops. So those devices have been cleared through our United Way IT director and programmed by him. And so we'll give you some instructions your first time working with them, what to do, not to do with those laptops. But we will have secure equipment, we'll have a secure printer, and we'll have secure scanners on site too. So I'll go more into detail what that looks like later. But just to let you know, when we talk about equipment, we'll be providing that on site.
Oh, this is the final one. I'm sorry about that. Okie doke.
Well, there's some overlap, so I could see how you did that. So that's great.
Yes. Yeah. Here we go. There we go. Aha. This is, and Melissa, you can share this with folks afterwards. I'll send you the PDF. So you're going to have secure equipment, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to want to social engineer you, because they might find out, through whatever your social media channels are, that you're doing this, and they're like, oh, okay, so they have access to thousands of people's taxpayer information in this VITA site. So how can I trick one of these people into clicking so that I can figure out their passwords? But again, we do lots of good stuff on the VITA site to try to protect from that. This awareness is just a human double check to make sure that you're paying attention. And frankly, it's good for your real life as well. One trick that's super important when you're looking at phishing emails is to hover over the name in the email that it's sent. If you hover over that, you can often tell if it came from the real email address of the person's name that's in that email. Usually they try to pick up somebody that or a business that they'll send something from your bank. And it's amazing how well they can figure out the right things to send to you just by the footprints that we leave out on social media and on the web. You can look at an email that looks nefarious as long as you don't click on it. They have not gotten to the point where just looking at an email will infect you. The typical spelling error flag, they're getting a lot better at that. So that's not a tip off as much as it used to be. whenever anybody asks me to provide personal information through an email that I'm not expecting, or even if I am expecting it, usually there's an avenue to go directly to the website that you're looking at, in which case, do that instead of clicking through the email. Phishers will try to get you to react quickly. They'll say, you need to act immediately, otherwise your package is not going to be delivered. Pretend to be FedEx or UPS, or send you something saying that your account is locked, or some other trick that makes you think you need to act quickly. And they prey on us when we're busy, and we're not paying close attention. Always take a step back, and those things that appear to be urgent aren't necessarily the case. A fun one that gets sent around to lots of law firms is an email that purports to be from the senior partner. And if anybody knows law firm structures, that when the senior partner says something, those lower down on the chain actually need to snap their fingers and get going. So they will try to sucker you into, I need you to do something for me right now. And so it's a typical, the boss, the CEO, whatever, sends those sorts of emails. Those are some tips to watch out for. So here are the basics, training your cyber senses to watch out for things. Click carefully, we've talked about that. Use strong passphrases. So through VITA, you will probably always have an email that, or a login that's specifically provided through United Way. So you won't necessarily worry about the same things that you do in real life. But never duplicate passphrases across important sites. I say across important sites, the guidance is really that you never duplicate them, but in practice, we're just not that good. So be sure to, what I do in my life is keep my personal life and my business life separate. I do not use the same passwords across personal things and work things. I do not use my work email for anything personal. That's one of my sort of firewalls to enforce my cyber senses, because I know then if I get something in my work email from something that purports to be my bank, I immediately know that's not real because my bank does not have my work email address. And being careful with your devices, making sure that that you're having your security firewalls, all of that stuff up to date on both your personal and your work devices is super important as well, and part of that process. Two-factor authentication, if you can do it. Melissa, are we having any two-factor authentication this year?
Yes, in some places we will.
Okay.
Yeah, we're working on that. We're getting everything programmed as we speak. So I'll double check on that.
Right. So, and I see John saying, I think we'll ask volunteers not too long onto their email accounts between clients. I think that is a fabulous idea, just so that our United Way devices have less risk of getting compromised. Everyone, tends to have their own cell phone. So, it's not like you can't have access to the information while you're having breaks. So this password protect sensitive documents, I think that will not come up as much for us in our VITA lives, but certainly it comes up for us in our regular lives. I will never send a document with a social security number or other super sensitive financial information or what have you in an email unless the document is password protected. Adobe and I think even Word now have tools to allow you to password protect documents in a relatively easy way. And so again, I mean, these are, even if you have encryption, the encryption is only as good as, whatever standard is applied. And if it's encryption while it's in transit, when it arrives at the recipient's mailbox, you don't know whether they are going to have proper encryption to protect the document. So that's why password protection is important. The last one is the hardest one for most people to live with, and that's no public Wi-Fi. Public Wi-Fi is terrible for getting your information stolen. And if you are someone who absolutely can't live without logging on to the public Wi-Fi wherever you are, and I know that's my children at this point. The younger generation seems to not have as much fear of this as they probably should at this point. But public Wi-Fi, you're just broadcasting your information over the networks, even if they have a password. If it's password protected in a way that anybody can get that password by jumping through very simple hoops, it's not safe enough. So you can use a VPN tool through, if through work, your work should have VPN for you. And if you really need to get on a device, onto a computer or something, and you need that internet, you're better off to use your phone as a hotspot than to use the public Wi-Fi if you don't have VPN. So I've made it so that on my phone that it will not detect or ask me to join public Wi-Fi. So that's a setting that you can do on your devices so that you don't accidentally sign yourself up to somebody's public Wi-Fi and start broadcasting your information. I've raced through that. The last part is my cyber plan for practices. I do love this little cartoon though. So the way that you're 100% secure is that you just turn everything off. If you do think that you've been compromised and you click on something, your computer is behaving weirdly, the first thing you should do is disconnect from the internet, and then have someone come help you to check it out and see what appears to be wrong. And you can easily disconnect from the internet just by, I think it's at the top of the screen, or usually it's at the bottom on PCs. I'm on a Mac. The little broadcast symbol, if you just turn off your Wi-Fi, it will turn off the internet, since we're going to be operating from Wi-Fi hotspots for the most part. Let's see, do I have any other funny things to say here? Yeah, we should just go all out and sell our own data and cut out the middleman on the thievery. Okay, wow, I was fast on that. So there you go, Melissa. I want to be able to let people out early.
Well, thank you, Courtney. I think it's just great to keep that top of mind. Like you said, we know that we're on secure devices and that type of thing, but then, just when you're in situations, just keep that in mind. We are, dealing with sensitive data and some great personal tips too. So thank you for that.
Yeah. When you're somebody who has access to confidential information, you're always a target, regardless of whether you're on a super secure site or not. So they're looking for opportunities to attack people, like us who have access to sensitive information.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. And then Steve, are you ready with the couple of things you wanted to cover tonight?
Yes, just a moment here. Let me get things together.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. So I can talk for a couple of seconds here while you're getting things together.
Okay.
You ready?
Almost.
Okay. One other thing, just about the sites, I'll kind of dabble in site information in between things here. We do want everyone to wear masks at the sites, and we'll kind of run through the rough process, knowing that it might vary a little bit site to site. But we do want everyone to wear masks. At the site, we're going to ask people coming to wear masks, and for the preparers and the greeters / intake people to wear masks too. So when we're talking about equipment at the sites, you know, we have security, we have safety, we have all of that. We'll have, you know, paper, pens, you know, basic supplies like that. We'll have disinfectant and all of that PPE type of stuff this year too. So with that, I'm at a good stopping point. I'll turn it over to Steve.
Okay, let's see here. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, here we go.
All right, we can see your screen, looking good.
Okay. I got to figure out here. I can't see it. Oh, here we go. No, that's not it. No.
We see your list of PDF returns. Oh,
Yeah.
now it's
Screen
not
sharing has stopped. Okay.
Yep.
Just a moment here.
Okay. You might have to pull up the actual PDF before you share instead of
No, I did that.
Oh, okay.
That was there. It just somehow got cobbled up in the process. Here we go. I think I need to minimize this. No?
Well, we can try it one more time, and if it's still having a glitch, you can always email those to me, and I can email them out to the group later.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Nope, screen
Okay,
is not
just a moment.
sharing. We're on the gallery view here. I can see all the people, but if you share your screen, we'll try it.
Some reason I can't get back to the Zoom screen. No. I can see you.
That's all right.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure where I'm at. If I can
no
recover
problem.
from
We
this,
can,
I will.
Okay, yeah, just message me in the chat if you want to try again. Otherwise, we'll
Okay.
just move on. And we, Steve just had a couple of PDFs that he didn't get to come up last night. We're going to try again tonight, but I can email those out to everyone. That is not a problem.
I think the universe is trying to tell us that we've had enough training since we're having all these technical difficulties.
I think you are right. Yes, I think so. So I'll put my video back on here because I like to at least look out while I'm talking. So as far as site details, just wanted to touch on that. Like I said, we aren't going to go through and talk with each person about availability and which site we'll pair you with. I will reach out one-on-one next week to do that. But I just wanted to give you a general sense of the sites and how things work, knowing that site coordinators are going to be able to make adjustments as they see fit. So we have currently visited 2 of our sites out of our 3 VITA sites this year. We released the big list of sites. Some of those are run by AARP and some by United Way. So we have 3 of the 7 sites. As Marianne mentioned a couple of nights ago, we partner together, run the program at the same time, but we really have our own lanes that kind of run side by side with each other. So we are each certified to conduct these tax preparations at certain sites. We have multiple forms we have to send into the IRS that have to get approved. We have our own volunteers, our own volunteer certification, very, very similar, but different. So we go through a slightly different channel than AARP does. So our sites are the Palomares Center, Martin Luther King Center, and Friendly House. So we have sites in Moline, Rock Island, and Davenport. And I'll explain, you know, if you have any other questions about that when I reach out to you, I can explain further. And so we never want to turn a volunteer away from a site, but some of the AARP sites have returned volunteers and are pretty filled to the max. And part of what I've been doing at our site visits is looking at the space we have to see how many volunteers we can accommodate at one time. Because we certainly don't want to have just one person checking in, one doing taxes. You know, we want to have multiple people there to provide support as often as we can. So when people check in, it will be a separate area for check-in than tax preparation. It might be in the Martin Luther King Center. It's a different room with tax preparation. It might be in the Friendly House where it's a huge room and the tax preparers are just on the opposite side of the room. But we will ask people to check in, and we'll have designated people for check-in. And so those designated people will do the intake form and scanning, and then those volunteers will take it back to the tax preparers. And as I mentioned before, if you want to do both, you know, we're not going to stop you. But as far as that comfort level, you know, some people do not want to be doing that intake, and that's fine. So when I make those one-on-one calls to you, we'll kind of walk through what that looks like and what you're comfortable doing, whether you want to be a greeter or a preparer, or you know, if you're certified to review things, that type of thing. So we'll go through all of those with one-on-one conversations. And we do have equipment there. And so you don't have to worry about equipment. I'm just going to check the chat box here as a thing. So Scott Community College is not a site this year. So the list of sites is on the flyer that I emailed out. The site coordinators got it the night before last, and then I sent it out to everyone else yesterday. So those are the sites for this year. We may add a virtual ad hoc site if we find a need, but otherwise those are the sites. You know, Davenport Public Library and KSI, those are AARP run. And so Ray with AARP has started the process with those, but he doesn't know if and when those will open up. So that is outside of my purview. We would love it if they would open up. But if they don't, you know, we're telling them, you know, send them to one of our sites and we'll try to help those people too. So a lot of the community colleges and regular colleges, Western Illinois, Scott Community College, Eastern Iowa, they are not admitting anyone in their buildings this year. So if people ask you, you know, what's going on there with the schools, it's just they want to be consistent with what they're presenting out there to the public, and they want to be safe. And we have to respect that. So we'll work with what we have. So just so you know, that list of sites does look different than it has in the past if you've been familiar with the program in the past. Looking at everything else, you know, we do try to keep everything on site there with the preparation and all of that. But your site coordinator will let you know if something changes, if we're pivoting to a different model, because we really just have to see how things go this year. And so we will have a plan. And when you arrive, your first time to volunteer, you will be walked through that plan and all of the procedures in place. So I know part of it's a leap of faith because you don't know everything till you get there, but you will know how to prepare a tax return. You'll know the basic, you know, system of how we're going to do things. But a lot of it, it's like any job, you'll learn as you dig in and get in there. And so I'll open it up if any of the site coordinators want to add anything to that, or if anyone else has any questions, I'll open that up for sites here before we go on to anything else.
Melissa, I think I'm ready.
Okay, first I'm going to check just because I want to make sure I answer these and don't forget to come back.
That's fine.
Any site questions? And like I said, I'll call you all the volunteers one-on-one next week. So if you think of something, of course you can email me or we can talk about it on the call next week. And then Steve, I have one quick question and then I'll turn it back over to you. We have somebody who has a question about the economic impact credit. Does the site calculate how much the taxpayer may be owed through the recovery rebate credit based on what they have already received? Or is that something we have to enter in ourselves? Anyone have an answer for that?
Well, I'm not not sure. I know at least for the economic impact payments or whatever they were called, the $1,200 earlier and the recent $600, plus others for, other a spouse or children. There is a page that comes up that asks you to input how much you received. And it looks like you're supposed to get a 1445 form in the mail that tells you how much you were sent. And so based on that, that's what you're supposed to enter in there. And then if you didn't get one and you leave that blank, then on page 2 of the return, it puts in a credit for that amount. So if you didn't get it earlier, or you didn't qualify, well, either perhaps you didn't qualify for it, say in 2019, you made $200,000, so you wouldn't have gotten one because the original payments were based on 2018 or 19. But then say you lost your job and at the end of 2019, and so all through 2020 you were unemployed, you'd have no income. So it's actually based on 2020. So then you'd enter 0 there for what you received, and you'd get a credit for the amount you should have received. If the opposite thing happened, as I understand it, and you were unemployed in 2019 and got the $1,200, for example, and maybe even this, what I've heard was based previously on the $1,200. And then in 2020, you had a job where you made $200,000. They're not going to ask for the money back. Now, as I say that, it said in most cases, so maybe if you had $200,000, they would ask for the money back, but it sounded like you weren't going to have to repay it if you actually weren't qualified for it or qualified for as much in 2020.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And I will finally turn it back over to you now.
Oh, okay. So last evening I was attempting to show you the Iowa return, and actually a couple of them. So can you see this one?
Yes. We can
okay,
see it.
good. I turned these into PDFs so I could show those to you directly. Last evening I was in TaxSlayer and pulling the PDFs out of that program, and apparently that doesn't work. So anyway, here we are. As I was trying to explain the other evening, your personal information is at the top as you would expect. Filing status over here. When you entered information about your county and school district, those are changed into the numerical codes for those. Scott County is 82. As I mentioned last night, the really old time license plates used to say, for Scott County, used to say 82 dash, and then they'd have a number. And the school district, Davenport School District, the numeric code for that is 1611. So then down here in what they call step 3 exemptions is where you enter, you have, 2, in this case, there's a married couple, and then they're both in their 70s in my example here. So they get two $20 exemptions for that, for a total of $120 in exemption credits, which are applied on page 2. So anyway, here's their gross income. They had some wages and salaries. This is the joint return. They had some taxable interest, some little bit of business income. The spouse, one of the spouses, had a small business, very small, obviously, but I just plugged in a number. So they had, one spouse had taxable pensions of $35,000 for a total of $39,399. Then there was the self-employment tax associated with the business income. And so the deduction for the part of that is also deducted in the adjustments before adjusted gross income on the federal return. Then they had health insurance premiums and some long-term care insurance. They had the pension retirement income exclusion since they had 35,000 and both qualified for it by virtue of age. Since only one had a pension, they got the maximum of $12,000, which comes down to total adjustments of 15,540, and then what they call as Iowa net income 23,859. As I mentioned the other evening, it's really complicated to try to figure out in advance if a taxpayer is at the threshold, the income threshold for whether or not they have to file. So it's because it really takes a bunch of the information between lines 1 and 25. So if you, so it's best just to go ahead and start on the return. And if they don't reach the threshold for income to have to file, right here on line 26 in capital letters, they'll say low income exclusion. And after that, for the rest of the return, there will be nothing. Going on to page 2, all of this would be blank, except for if they had taxes withheld, that would be there, and those would show up as a refund. So even if it says low income exclusion, you want to make sure you look to see if they actually had something coming. If they had the low income exclusion, it's my understanding, and I'll leave this open if anybody has a different opinion, that they don't need to file. So, so anyway, so in this case, when you look at this return for these two, Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson, they, in this case, would owe $198 on this tax return, married filing jointly. So I want to move over then to the same return if you were to, and remember in Iowa, you can either be joint or separate on a combined return if you're married. So if we looked at that return, here's the combined return. So it's split into the two columns here. This one here that is the spouse, and then column A is you, so that's the taxpayer, or joint, which we just looked at that when everything was in this column. So here the wages and salaries that were on there, those were all for the taxpayer, and then the interest income was split between the two. So they each had accounts of their own in this case. The business income was associated with the spouse. The taxpayer had all of the pension income. And so then you have two subtotals. Then the deductible part of the self-employment tax shows up for the spouse, since that is the person that had the business. And you may recall yesterday when we actually were looking through the adjustment screens that this showed up for the taxpayer. And so I'm not sure how that happens, but we moved that over for purpose of this, and it was always here, so I'm not sure what was going on in tax layer, but we fixed it there with an adjustment just to make sure it didn't affect anything else. Their health insurance premiums is Medicare, so those are there for each of them. The pension income exclusion applied only to the taxpayer with the pension income, and so those subtotals are down here for deductions. And so then you have the net income, and so the net income for the spouse was negative, and all of the net income was, or the net income for the taxpayer is here. Then carrying over, And this is the part of the return here, the federal taxes and qualified deductions. This is where you go through the taxes withheld in 2020, and then the refund that was received in 2020 from the 2019 or any prior returns that were for which they received refunds in 2020. And so this is that reconciliation process that as you go through time will balance out so that the proper deduction for federal taxes paid against Iowa income is taken care of. There are also other things in here because here is where the qualified business income shows up. And I'll show you another screen because I actually had to fix this when I went back and looked at this originally last evening after the class. This was $20 for each spouse. And this is the qualified business income deduction, so it should be for the spouse. And so I had to make an adjustment to get that all to carry back over here. That's calculated in taxpayer tax slayer. And so it apparently, well, not apparently, obviously treated as a joint item and split it between the two, which I guess seemed a little odd to me, but so did the $60 that showed up for the spouse in the adjustment pages. So carrying on, it carries through it. As I said, when you come down to what the total tax is, it adds the two together. I might back up here just a bit. Up here, it brings over your income balance, subtracts the standard deduction, and then comes down to taxable income. Taxable income for the spouse is negative. So I think you can see already that this is not going to be the best situation for this couple. But if you carry on down here through the calculation of the tax, the application of the credits, and then the net tax, and then carries on down to where their income, where there's the withholding is, and crediting back against the total tax, they end up here owing $4,472. So that's obviously more and a less beneficial situation than if they would have filed jointly. So anyway, that's how that looks. I will show you now then the whoops, wrong screen. The adjustment that I had to make in tax slayer for the fact that the deduction for the qualified business income showed up originally on the joint return, on the separate on combined returns as $20 for each spouse, and should have been $40 for the spouse. So what I had to do there is put in a negative $20 for the taxpayer and positive for the spouse. And so all that does is move the $20 from the taxpayer column over to the column for the spouse, which kind of running around the bush there. But anyway, that's what it took to get that moved over. So that's the type of adjustments you may have to make if you see that the allocations, which in this case, like I said, was based on it being a joint item, to move that to the proper column for the spouse. Okay, let me see here. I have one more. Let's see, Williamson. Okay, this return is really very simple, but this is a single taxpayer who is a non-resident, like as I mentioned last evening, may have come in from Indiana to work on the I-74 bridge, but this is their income. And then they also have some interest, which I just threw in there because it's kind of like, well, the person opened a bank account, put some money in a savings account so they'd be able to cash their paycheck at the bank. So anyway, that carries on down here. They didn't work in Iowa before, so they didn't have a previous refund or tax due, but they did have $1,000 withheld, so that gets deducted from their net income. Carries over here, and anyway, it goes down through the tax return, and they end up owing $191. And the non-resident return, because I mentioned yesterday or last evening, the Iowa return is just the same Iowa 1040. There's not actually a non-resident return. There's this non-resident form, and so this is a non-resident for all of 2020 for you or joint, so it's a single taxpayer, so that's checked there. Part year resident of Iowa, and for spouse or taxpayer, no. And then it has dates moved in or moved out for either, and in this case it's a full year non-resident, so none of those apply. So anyway, what happens here, again, there's column for the spouse if it's a combined return, and you or joint if it's single or a joint return. So in this case, single. So those items carry down here by line item from the Iowa 1040, and comes down to the all source income being 15,148. And so it does a calculation of that against the total. Well, it's the Iowa net income against the all source income. So that's 100%. So it just carries on down. There, in this case, is nothing that they would get credit for or that is not Iowa income. If this was a part year and this person had worked in Iowa for half of the year, then you would expect to see, based on if it was exactly 50% or, 6 months, then that would show up as 50% and would be allocated that way. And they would have a credit on their, on page 2 of their Iowa return. Anyway, that's just a whirlwind tour through there, and would try to answer any questions if you have them.
Let's see, I'm going to the chat box here. Oh, John's been answering questions for us.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Any other questions that haven't been answered yet?
Well, you're welcome on answering those questions. I just wanted to comment that when you first sit here and look at this, the Iowa return looks like it's some kind of calculus problem for students. It really isn't that difficult. There are a lot of things that you need to watch for, but after a few returns, they become secondhand, and you can get through them rather quickly and easily without a lot of hair pulling or teeth biting or nail biting on yourself.
Yeah, TaxSlayer, as far as inputting the information, is not that complicated. It's just that when you, as I mentioned last evening, at least the problem I get into is when you actually start. I mean, usually what we have done is when we're finished with the taxpayer, we would go through the return with them, explain, what's going on. Here's your W-2 income, here's your interest. But when you get down here to this, the federal taxes, additions and deductions, that's a little complicated because there's really 2 years worth of information going on here. But it does, once you kind of get in, after you've done a few returns, it kind of becomes a whole lot easier. But it is, that part of it is a little difficult to explain. And in fact, I think it's in the ARP Iowa tax guide, it says, this may take a little bit of explaining so the taxpayer understands this part of the return. So it does, but yeah, John's right. As far as what you're entering the information, it's, it's not that complicated, and this is just how it turns out. But the combined and, filing separately on the combined return is also a little bit of a, takes some explaining.
And what advice would you offer to anyone on this meeting who maybe's gone through it once or twice, but is just still feeling a little awkward with TaxSlayer? Is that common, and do people show up and it takes them a couple of shifts to get into it? Or what have you seen just with people who are new to this program when you're on the site?
Well, sure. I mean, even myself, you go through the test and you look at these things, and, this is not something that I study 12 months of the year. And, the experience helps you know what to look out for. But you definitely get into a rhythm after a couple of sessions. So it's, the main thing is that, if you have any questions or any problems, you just, ask somebody else, and, we all try to work together, and not all try to, we all do work together, and, take care of the taxpayer, solve the issues. And if it's a question that, like a, but anyway, if there's some question that's not, readily, that we can't answer readily, we'll ask the taxpayer to, well, I guess it'll be different this year, but in the past, we've just asked them if, we need to research this, and, we'll let you know, and we'll have you come back, and, before we normally would open, or whatever, and squeeze you in somewhere, and get it taken care of.
Yep. And this year we'll be calling out via phone, but yeah, they have that final appointment to pick up too.
Yeah.
So there will be 2 touch points plus the phone calls, and,
Yeah.
like I said, you might have to tweak the system as we go too, if something's
Sure.
not working right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that will be, to some extent, a little bit of an advantage this year, because you won't be sitting across the table from the taxpayer. And so you'll have more time, so to speak, to, I think, kind of, look things up if you need to. The person, it's not that the person's sitting right across the table from you, waiting. So that, that'll help also. But no, it's something, you do a few, and you get used to it, and things go smoothly.
And for the volunteers, I want you to understand that you're never alone. There's always others there, either the coordinator, the quality reviewer, or even a fellow volunteer. There's always somebody there that you can ask questions, get some feedback from somebody else who maybe has done that very same situation before. And there's always someone there that will be able to help you. At times it may seem like there's nobody here because everybody's busy working on something, but know that we're always there. We're always willing to help. We're always willing to share what experience we have had that will help you hopefully work through the situation you're in, and get the taxpayer's return done to the best that we can do, and offer him the best refund or the best return that he can find out there.
Yeah. And if I may answer the last question there, do you normally begin by preparing the Iowa return as married filing separately on a combined return? Is there no way the TaxSlayer can tell you which is the most beneficial? Is there a diagnostic after preparing the return? Okay. Actually, when you're going through those screens, one of the, let me think about this. One of the first screens that comes up is the one that in the lower part of that says, ask you the filing status if you're married. That is where you can either, there's a drop-down box and it says select. And if you click on that, you get 2 choices. One of them is married filing jointly or married filing separately on a combined return. If you leave it on select and don't pick one of those, TaxSlayer will find the best one. So you can force it to be one way or another. If there should be a question, for example, say a taxpayer has in the past, had the two spouses both had good incomes. And so that's a situation where most likely the married filing separately on a combined return is going to yield the best results, because jointly you add those two incomes together, it pushes you into higher tax brackets. So let's just say that that was 2019 when they filed married filing separately on a combined return, and then one of them lost their job, and so now they only have one income. And in that case, most likely it's going to be the joint return it's going to be the married filing separately. Am I saying this right? No,
you had it right the first time. It's
married filing
jointly.
jointly. Yeah, I was thinking, okay, what about the tax brackets? Yeah, the married filing jointly would be the best there. So, but so that would be a case where you would be able to show them, both scenarios, and show them that what TaxSlayer had done was the best. And if for some reason it wasn't, you could change it. And as far as diagnostic after preparing the return, that's where the quality review comes in, where a second person looks at the return and, looks for, checks the return over to see that they concur with the way it was prepared.
Another question I received, a couple people emailed a few questions just in anticipation of tonight, which was very nice of you, because then we can kind of insert them with the flow. Do you see, I guess this would apply to people on both sides of the river, in Illinois, do you see a lot of Iowa returns? In Iowa, do you see a lot of Illinois returns? And what have you experienced as far as, us being regional across two states with seeing those state returns?
I would say that typically, I've been at the Friendly House, and typically there we would see mostly Iowa returns, but we do see some Illinois returns. And so, but sometimes it depends on where the person can get the appointment the soonest, and so they want to get their refund. So if we're booked up at the Friendly House until till the end of February, and they can get a spot at the Martin Luther King Center, they're probably going to go for it. So it depends, and that's why we cover both of those, because we do run into them. But I would say generally it would go by the side of the river you're on.
Okay, yeah, and we might see that this year with fewer Iowa sites. We might see more Iowa and Illinois, so that's a good call out. Yeah.
Another factor that falls in there is where they're working at. If they work 2 blocks from the Iowa site, it might be more convenient for them, even though they live in Illinois, to go to the Iowa site, get the return done, than to go all the way across the river to an Illinois site to do it.
That's true. Because we have
any other questions that anyone has, or if we don't have questions, I guess I turn it over to any of our experienced people to just offer some words of wisdom or just notes you want to make on our final session.
I was wondering, you've started a couple of times, Melissa, to go through the process, the site process, but we haven't gone through it all the way around. Obviously, step one is going to be a separate group. As volunteer preparers, we're going to be someplace else. Can you go through the whole process as best, again, recognizing that we might have to pivot, as the saying goes?
Yes. So the tax preparer, when they come, they will have called into our 211 or local designated number to make their appointment. When they make their appointment, they'll be walked through this general process, and they will also be told everything they need to bring. They'll be told about the stimulus amount to know that. And then we have volunteers who work in remote jobs with a couple of companies we have partnerships with, who will make reminder calls. So when the people show up, they will have had 2 touch points with our instructions. Now you're still going to have people, it's human nature, who will not have something or have to come back with, a document or something, but we definitely do our due diligence with trying to prepare them for the process. When they arrive, What we anticipate is having 2 check-in points at each site, have scanners in the intake form with those greeters. So they'll collect their information, scan it, fill out the intake form, verify their phone number a couple of times and say, you know, we're going to give this to our tax preparer and we will be in touch if we have any questions at this number, and we will call you back when the return is ready. And the site coordinator will have a good idea based on how many volunteers we have of what that window looks like. So we'll try to give them a window of time. Now, there might be cases in some of our centers, we have enough social distancing room. If somebody rode a bus there and they just say, nope, I'm not coming back, I need to wait, then, you know, we can make those accommodations and have them, you know, wait in a designated area. But we should really try to do our best to get them to leave and then come back, just to make sure it doesn't get too congested. So then that intake form and the scanned items get taken back to the tax preparer. Then the tax preparer will work on that return. We're hoping to have some designated, you know, burner phones that you can use if you need to call somebody, so that way it's not the personal phone. And so calling to connect with them if you need to in between. And then when your return is done, then a quality reviewer will take it and look it over. And then, you know, the quality reviewer or site coordinator will coordinate, you know, who that person is that meets with the person when they come back. So if as a tax preparer, you say, nope, I still don't want to have that contact, then we'll have somebody else, you know, walk through it with them when they make their return appointment. And the site coordinators and the key people at each site are going to determine when they can come back. We don't want to make that an arbitrary time just because we want to accommodate for, you know, different circumstances. Some might not take as long as others. And then you might look at a schedule for one day. We'll have a printout each day of our appointments. You might look at it for one day and say, oh my gosh, it's light today. Let's get a bunch of those people back in to sign their returns. We have publicized days and times when the sites are open. It might be, if we have availability in the building, where people will come back to sign their returns at a time, you know, that's not necessarily on the flyer. But that's really going to be left up to the site coordinators to determine what looks best at their location. And I'm going to pause here to see, is the preparer entering from original docs or scanned documents? So we're planning to scan them when possible. Now, sometimes there might be, you know, a 20-page item. If they're comfortable leaving that, that's another place where, you know, we can make that determination and the site coordinator can give you some direction if you have questions. You know, for instance, if we're asking somebody to drop off an ID and leave for half a day or longer and come back, they probably aren't going to want to do that. So that's where the scanner comes in handy. But if it's a longer document or they just say, here, you can have it, we just have to make sure that those are secure and that there's a process for that. So whenever we can, we're going to scan it. So then they come in and, you know, sign off, and then that is completed. So I guess I'll turn it over to the site coordinators or experienced people if there's anything I missed in that process, you know, as far as what you've done in the past that definitely needs to be done this year that I might have missed in that overview.
I just might mention, excuse me, may have mentioned this before, but at the end of the last tax season, so this would have been last April after the, you know, the COVID was hot and heavy. We had a lot of people that, you know, had appointments that, you know, weren't able to be fulfilled because we'd shut the site down. At least, I guess we'd shut all of them down. So what we did at the end when, you know, by the beginning of April, I guess things were, you know, we'd gotten down to, you know, where we knew that masks and gloves and distance could be effective. we, two of us, and the person that previously had the position that Melissa has now, we set up a tent at the Fairmont Library in Davenport and had a drive-in session. We only had 12 people, but that was 12 people, 12 taxpayers we were able to help. But what we did there was they would come in, roll down their window a little bit in their car. They park in a parking place. We would slip in a copy of the intake form that Sarah explained on Monday night, and asked them to fill that out. We had them on clipboards, and they could fill them out. And in fact, in one case, there were 2 people in one car, so they both filled them out. And then we took those, with our masks and gloves, took those, and we did was had them put those documents in a plastic envelope, the one that you could see through, but it was plastic and had one of these cord ties that you wrap around the little cardboard wheelie things. And so we put everything in there, and then we put those in a box. Well, first of all, we looked at the intake form that they gave us and looked for any obvious questions and asked those and jotted down notes on the form. Then put that in the envelope also. And Zach was the old Melissa, and he took them back to the United Way and scanned those documents. And then he emailed them to one of the 2 of us. And then we prepared the returns, and then we would contact the taxpayers with any questions we had about, about their situation, and resolved any questions that way. And then we would email Zach and tell him that so-and-so's return was done. And then he would contact those people and tell them that the return was done, explain, over the phone about the return, whether they had a refund or owed money and what the situation was. Then I'm not sure exactly how he worked it then, because there are some forms that they needed to sign. So I guess they had to come back. I guess they had to come back then to the United Way office and sign those forms. And then he would email them and, send the return off, and then, delete the information that he had saved in his computer from the scanning, since, we're not supposed to keep any of that information. So that, seemed to work pretty well for those 12 people anyway, that were on the 1st of April. We're still hoping to get someone to do their taxes for a reasonable price.
Yeah, so, that just goes to show if things change, that's one example of where we try to, be flexible and think outside the box and, do whatever we can to finish that process and serve people. And, drive-through works well in the spring, but February, that can be a little iffy. But that's, something we may need to pivot to if something gets locked down again, and that's our only option. So thanks for bringing that up, Steve, because that's a perfect case of, what, plan A fell through, so what's plan B? And we really thought long and hard, and I talked with Marianne with AARP a long time too about, the challenges of doing it various ways. And there's a lot of possibilities out there. There's a lot of things you have to get approved through the IRS. And so what we're doing is very close to what AARP is doing. There are some variations here and there, but also our community members are used to showing up at certain sites. And so we really wanted to have things out at some of those sites, knowing that there's not as many as in past years, but just to provide a little bit of continuity with, them going to a site that hopefully they've gone to before, or they've heard of being a VITA site before. Great questions. Any other questions?
I do have one other.
Yeah.
I took the basic test today. didn't make it. Came up a little short, and then going through my corrections, it constantly refers to publication 4491 as another resource. I cannot, for the life of me, find publication 4491 anywhere.
Okay, let me try to Google it here. Did you try to Google IRS publication? What was it?
4491. No, I did not try doing that.
So any IRS publication, including your 4012, is a link on irs.gov. So let me see.
Can I interrupt you? 4491 is the training manual. So you guys didn't get that in your packet, but if you go to irs.gov and go to the search button and type in 4491, it'll bring up this year's training manual.
Yeah, a lot of things they are only doing online this year. In fact, I was elated that we got what we did in hard copy because we were warned very early on that most things would be online. Yep, so I just Googled IRS publication 4491, and there's you want to make sure it's connected to irs.gov, and I pulled it up here so I can email that out to everyone too, if you'd like. So you have that exact link. But yeah, the irs.gov website, your Link and Learn, if you search for those, you can usually find just about any IRS document.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that'll be a tool for people who didn't make this call too, to show them that's out there.
Another, I guess, advice or warning: when you're taking the certification test, read the questions very carefully, because a lot of them are worded in such a way that you think it's answer A when in fact it's answer B or C because of the wording of the question. So read the questions very carefully, and then from the question answer, pick the answer that best fits that question.
Kind of like the tax forms.
Yes.
Sure is.
And just remember my grandfather's advice that he always gave me. He always told me if it were easy, everybody'd be doing this, but it's not easy. So suck it up, buttercup, and get it done.
That's a good one.
I would say also just this is just off the wall comment, but is talking about the taxes and that we also have people that bring in their tax returns that they prepared themselves with TurboTax or something, and submitted them, and they got a letter from the IRS that said they needed to do this or that, and came to our sites to ask how to fix it up, or how do I do this, and as time is permitted, in some cases, if we were somebody didn't show up for their appointment or something, if the timing was good, we would actually go back, and what we'd have to do is re-enter their tax situation with which they had put into TurboTax, put that into TaxSlayer, and then from there, print out the form, fix it, and print out the form that the IRS was asking for, and give it to them so they could take it home and send it into them. So we've done those kinds of things too. So we're not, we're willing to help people pretty much wherever we can if the time permits.
Okay, if a return warrants, do you attach PDF files to a tax return? Example, Schedule D sales.
That's possible. We have never done that because we've never had scanners before. Also, usually, trying to think about, again, just, kind of getting back into the groove here. In a lot of cases, information involving investments and that can be entered. You don't have to enter every line. There's ways that it can be entered in a summary form. That's not as easy as making a copy of it and sending it in, but you can do that because that information was also submitted to the IRS, so they just have something to match up with.
Thank you. And we have been recording each of these sessions, so wanted to let you all know that I will email all 4 individual Zoom recordings to you. There'll be a link with a password. So I will get those sent out to you. Hopefully tomorrow I'll have them all to send to you. If not tomorrow, next week. So you can come back to these and you can, fast forward or back up to different sections and review them if you'd like also. And then I will be at the United Way office tomorrow between 2 and 4. If you want to pick up your packet, which is the 4012 publication and then the 6744. So you're welcome to swing by between 2 and 4 tomorrow. Those documents are also online. So when I send out the 4491 link, I'll link to both of those too. So you can have them on your computer, and we'll have some extra volunteer manuals because they're just a nice resource. We'll have some of those on site too as extra copies.
Well, Melissa, I want to thank you for putting all of this together and getting everybody contacted and aware of what was going on. This has been, I hope everybody else has gotten a lot out of this. I hope those who come to the Friendly House will have researched, at least for the questions that are asked on the exam, and be not starting from square one, but at least a little bit into how to do a tax return when they get over there. We, of course, will always be there to help them get through any questions or concerns or any sticky points they may have in the returns. And because what we want is for everybody at the end of the season to say, that was something I really am glad I took part in. I really enjoyed it and I really want to do it again. So again, Melissa, thank you for your efforts to get everything rounded up and put together. And I hope everyone has learned a lot and walks away with it from this with a firm understanding of at least the basics of a tax return.
Yes, likewise, I agree with what John said. It is, as I mentioned, I think back on Monday in the introductions, I don't know, I found this, very rewarding to help people because, almost everybody is just, they're very glad to have help with their taxes, because of the income credit, earned income credit and things like that. I saw a return one time where a single parent, and they had some income, which helped too, but they had like a $10,000 refund coming, and I think they had like 5 or 6 children. And so there are people out there that really need help and really benefit from this service. And the earned income credit is that's what it was designed for, is to help people who are working, to give them a little extra help. And I think that's primarily one of the reasons why this program, came into being. But, certainly has kept me coming back. And as I said, we have people that come back year after year, and you see them and you may not remember their name until you look at their W-2 or their ID, but you certainly recognize them when they walk in the door. And I see a woman when I'm out sometimes just driving down the streets. She stands on the corner and waits for the bus, and she recognizes me when I go by. So it's I don't know, I found it to be a good experience.
Well, thank you to Steve and John and Courtney and, Allison and everyone else on the call who has taken a leadership role with VITA. My job's easy because of all of you. So I appreciate you all bearing with me too. And, you're not left on your own between now and when you show up at the site. Like I said, I'll be in touch next week to talk about, you know, your availability, when we want you to start, that type of thing. I'm a phone call or an email away if you have any questions. So, you know, you have some time to go through the materials. You can review the recordings. You know, you don't have to take the test tomorrow. You have a couple of weeks here. Definitely don't want to put it off till the last minute, but you do have some time. And we tried to organize this so that you would have a little time. And the recordings, somebody's asking where those are. I will email those out. They will be a Zoom link with a password, and there'll be a unique link and password for each session. So you'll access one session at a time. So I will try to email those out tomorrow because I have been getting them the next day for the previous day. So as long as technology works with me, I'll send those out tomorrow, and I'll be at the United Way office 2 to 4 tomorrow. I would like to be there in the evenings, but since we're in a bank building, the outside lobby doors are locked in the evening, and we're on the 4th floor. So there's really no way for me to safely keep it open for you after that. But if you need something and we need to meet in a parking lot or something, don't ever hesitate to tell me, because we've done that before with some other people. So I'll have that. And then just so you know, we are off for Martin Luther King holiday at United Way on Monday. So if you don't hear from me on Monday, that's why. But I'll keep an eye on things, and I'll definitely be plugged in again on Tuesday all day. So with that, I think that concludes our training, and just want to say to everybody, presenters and participants, thanks for trying something new, because this was a totally new thing we did this year. And with that too, as we're talking the next few days, if you have any suggestions for how we could do this next year, you know, I'd like to be in person next year, but it might be something where we do a combination of things if this worked well. So let me check chat here. All right. I've got one direct message, so I'm not going to hop off. I'm going to make a note here. But for everyone, just want to say thank you again. And I hope you've taken some good things away from these trainings, and we'll hopefully see you soon at one of the sites. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for your help.
Goodbye, everybody.